Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the Level Up Corner podcast. My name is Travis McCullum, and I like to play D&D. I'm not that good at it, but with me, I have people that have a little bit more experience. The first one to my far left would be Sherry. Introduce yourself.
All right. Well, hi everyone. I'm Sherry. Um, Playing D&D since, gosh, I don't know, probably like 2012, 2013, I'd say. So almost 10 years. Um, I have a lot of other hobbies though. I like to read fantasy books. I have two cats. I love cats. I like cooking. I like exercising. All sorts of different things. But I'm basically just a huge nerd. In terms of work, I teach classes at my local university, and I'm also part of the Level Up Corner, which is an awesome business that I love being a part of. And I happen to be married to the guy in the middle, who is.
And go ahead, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Kyle, but most of my players know me as a Wizo. I am a professional dungeon master for D&D. I DM full time. I also write blogs for levelupcorner.com. If you need any D&D tips, tricks, or anything else, any help there, you can go there. And we also do a bunch of things like this for the podcast, and we're trying to expand the different content that we're able to give to you all. Aside from just the business side of me, I do like to play a lot of video games and listen to D&D, other games and stuff on the side, as well as a few board games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have just a couple.
Bookshelf.
Just a few.
Yeah. Play board
Yeah,
games,
but
read,
nobody
ultimate
has
nerdy, like
I mean,
LARP when possible. Have fun.
Admittedly, for those watching the video version, I could just gesture over to my
Closed
closet over
closet.
here.
Yeah.
It's full of board games too. I fell down that rabbit hole with Kyle a long time ago.
You're
I've
welcome.
known Kyle for about 15 and a half years. We went to high school together, and that is where I was introduced to D&D. And I only played a couple campaigns, and then I sort of fell off of playing D&D for a very long time, working in news media, from video games to television to movies to pretty much anybody that would hire me. And I'm still a freelance writer to this day, as well as head of marketing for the Level Up Corner. So, all of us are involved in the Level Up Corner in one way, shape, or form. And yeah, I mean, I play a lot of video games and board games as well. And I come from a place where I only started playing D&D regularly when the pandemic happened. And that's what got me back into playing regularly. And so I come with a less experience than these other two, but I also have a lot more podcasting experience, so I know how to keep a conversation going. So that's where my expertise lies.
And you are the glorious face, of course.
Yeah, but the downside is that we're all introverts. So
Yes.
can we really keep the conversation going?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the thing is, I'm absolutely an introvert, but I can turn it on whenever I need to. I always tell people, if I know you, I can talk your ear off. If I don't know
That
you,
is true.
leave. Because people
Well, it's a good thing you know us.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah. So I can turn it on when I need to.
Also, something that I think I forgot to mention, how long I've been playing D&D. I have been playing D&D for 20 years, ever since I was introduced to D&D when I was a young child, and we all looked outside, saw a sunny day, then thought, what can we do inside? And then taught how to play by my dad, and since then, yeah.
I mean, that's how it tends to happen. Everybody has their own introductions to it, and everybody kind of grows and develops as a player, over time. And for me, when I was in high school, it was just about hitting things and screwing around and not really caring about any sort of role playing or anything. It was just do this weird nerdy thing that a couple people tend to play in their basements and just kind of whatever. But thanks to sites like the Forge and Foundry and Roll20 and other places, there are opportunities to play D&D in a more remote setting, in a way that people who maybe never played before now have an opportunity to play. And luckily, that's where the Level Up Corner comes in, not just the podcast, but the website itself, because it offers a lot of tips and tricks and things that people who maybe don't have as much experience will now have an opportunity to learn. Not just for players, but for DMs as well, because it doesn't matter how long you've been playing, DMs can make mistakes. DMs are fallible people. So, Kyle, I'm pretty sure you know quite a bit about that.
It's not like I make a mistake every session, at least one or multiple. No.
No, but even if you're a professional, it can still happen. It's something that you know.
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time. And there's many times where you're just like, oh, I could have done things better here, and you just kind of beat yourself up about it. It doesn't go away. New DMs, you're probably thinking at one point like, oh, does it ever go away? This insecurity of you thinking that, oh, maybe I could have done better, and the answer is no. You will always be learning.
It never goes away. It's always something that is there. And even if you're a player, players will make mistakes and ask questions. And I mean, I still don't understand a lot of things. I've been playing for a year and a half now, and I still have to ask at least 2 or 3 questions a session. There's a lot of times where I'm like, Kyle, what the hell's this? I don't.
How does sneak attack work? I'm only a 17th level rogue or whatever.
Yeah, like how does this thing work? How does that thing work? Like everybody makes those mistakes and has those questions, and that's where the level up corner comes in, is that it allows people an opportunity to learn those things. And even though we've had a YouTube channel that has posted the live feeds of, because you can find it on Twitch at twitch.tv/levelupcorner. That's where you can find a lot of, because Kyle likes to stream a good number of his sessions, not all of them, but a good chunk of them get streamed over on Twitch, and then the VODs get put on YouTube later. But we figured we wanted some extra content there, and that's where the podcast comes in, because we've all known each other for quite some time. Sherry, not as long as Kyle, but a long enough time where especially playing D&D here past year and a half, is we all know each other well enough, and we're like, screw it, why not? We'll just talk about nothing every week anyway, so why don't we take this and turn it into something that people can get to know us, especially the person that runs the website himself. So, well,
right, our face.
Yeah.
Put a face to it. I mean, a lot of people have seen Kyle's face, but us two, we're the other.
Yeah, they don't know who we are.
We're the other backbone.
But we're the reason why Level Up Corner is going to succeed, right, Travis?
I would say so, although I will say in the mid-2010s, I had a bit of a presence on YouTube with about 5,000 subscribers, but that died out after about 4 years. So some people might know my face, but otherwise, no, we're kind of the backbone of it. Kyle's the lovely face of the business. But
looking good, Kyle.
But
Thank you. I work hard on the blushes and the blemish and the makeup things as well as everything else.
As you say, as you brush your patchy beard.
Oh shush, he's doing his best.
He's trying. He's doing the best he can.
I like this style of beard. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm not gonna crap all over it. I mean, everybody has their ways of doing it, and I mean, like with me, it was with starting D&D was in high school, and it's interesting. I would say how people develop over time as players. I mean, we've had a conversation. We had a game with some people that we went to high school with last year. There was a campaign that ran for about a year. And it's interesting how players develop as time goes on. I mean, how would you say you played when you were in high school compared to how you play now? This is for both Sherry and Kyle.
Well, I didn't play in high school, so I play a lot better now, obviously.
But, as a player, how do you think you developed on the role-playing side as well as the way you just
when
play
I started out, it was pretty, like, hey, we have this group, you want to join? It'll be fun kind of thing, and we basically just screwed around. And, like, me and my friends, we didn't really care too much, and it was the adults who actually took charge and played the game. So it was basically me and some college friends, and then like their dad and older friend. And it was a weird group. But yeah, I didn't really care. I was just there along for the ride. I had no idea what I was doing. I don't even think I really role played. I just did what they told me to do, and I was really just there to hang out with my friends. So it wasn't really until later that I started caring.
Yeah, and that's a common thing where, especially, I would say in the pre 5th edition era, even in 3.5, 3rd edition, and especially in 1st, there was a lot of, hey, are we fighting things? No? Okay. Why are we not fighting things or doing things? And then you have more of a, like, let's do this now type of task and mentality that players tended to have, and so did DMs. I mean, even back then, I was more focused on the idea of like where the story is going, being more in control of it, and not understanding the narrative structure that I do now, to where there's loose interpretations of where to go. And you need a plan. You can't just go in and be like, "Hey, what are we doing this session, players?" And they say, "I don't know," and you say, "Well, that's good because I don't know either." You have to have some sort of plan, but you don't want to have it as structured and to think of it more so as a play or a book where the players hit this point and then they go on a line to this point, etc. And that's what many that's where many problems arose, and where many new DMs have a problem finding when to have those points of interest that you plan, and when to let there be dead space for the players to fill. And that's just allowed for a lot more role play and a lot more for the players to infuse their own personality and care to give a crap about the game that they're playing, instead of, I rolled, I got an 18. Did I hit? No?
Yeah.
Turn.
No, and it is a thing too, because I mean, I've never DM'd, but I've played now, and I found myself, like when I was in high school, it was just the, did I hit the thing? Good, yay, move on. Or did I not hit the thing? Yay, move on. Otherwise, I didn't really care about the whole role-playing aspect out of it, except for how much can I screw with the DM, who usually was Kyle, and that's usually what it was. Like, it would be how often and how hard can I screw with Kyle. And, I mean, granted, some of that has...
That never goes away. Every group and every player has that.
Every group and every player has that, but I've found that in modern times, at least with playing now, is that all my characters generally tend to be chaotic people, because I'm just kind of a chaotic jokester sort of person in general. So I'm not gonna switch over to some lawful good character who's all stoic and what have you, because that's not the kind of person I am. I'm going to make snide remarks and jokes, and that's just kind of... So, in a sense, you're learning from a player side as well how to prepare and how to do certain things, because you want to kind of get to know your character. And I found when I was playing later, you would develop your character as the session went on, and as it went on, you learned sort of the idiosyncrasies and the ways that you wanted to play your character, like get into their mindset, get into their psychology of who it was. You know, I remember with that first game, when I started, I kind of wanted to be all secretive and whatever and like all buttoned up, but as time went on, I realized that the character just kind of didn't care about anything, and so would do whatever to the best of their abilities, because I learned, because I think a misconception that a lot of people have when they play chaotic characters is that being chaotic doesn't mean just screwing around. There's a certain sort of balance in the way that they play, where a lot of times, depending on if you're playing chaotic good or you're playing chaotic neutral or chaotic, depending on how you're playing, is you're going to learn that sometimes they're ultimately looking out for their own benefit, but they will do good if they feel like it benefits themselves. And then there's the other side where you're just a dick for the sake of being a dick. So a lot of times newer players will take that being a dick for the sake of being a dick. And
it's just what my character would do.
Yeah, it's just something they'll say it's just something my character would do, and they wouldn't really lean into that. But then, because one thing Kyle does in his sessions is that a lot of times, I mean, maybe it was just with me or like our groups. I don't know. I mean, I've edited a lot of your VODs and put them together, but um, how deep would you say you go when you're starting up a group and you're creating a group? How deep would you say you go with the character customization and getting them to put effort into building their character, or do you just go whatever, do whatever you want, I don't care, I'll write around it?
Primarily the latter. It's whatever you'd want to do, whatever you feel comfortable, because I found that if you as a DM force players to give you a lot of backstory and they're not interested in giving backstory, it's not going to be that big of a deal for them, and they're going to be more confrontational rather than accepting of
Mm-hmm.
that. If a player wants to give background, and then you need to incorporate that and respect that the player took the time to do so. It's just you need to be adjustable to your players. And the real character development isn't in what they wrote pre session. It's what they develop during the sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more just allowing these small little opportunities to happen. Let's say at a market and ask them if they want to buy things, and you figure out as a DM, oh no, they don't care. All right, then you move on until they care about something. If they show an interest, letting them expand upon that. So it's in character creation. It's just you being adaptable, and that's a lot of being a DM. It's just being
Yeah, and
adaptable.
it is a balance because, like I said, my first character went from a buttoned up ranger that didn't really care about anything to the embodiment of chaos riding a raptor. So anything's really possible in how you want to build it up. But Sherry, how much effort do you think you usually put when you're coming up with characters? What would you say?
Well, I find putting in more effort is actually pretty helpful. Um, I have had the experience of making a pretty bare bones character, which is actually the one I'm playing right now. Um, his name is Thanos. He's a rogue, swashbuckler pirate. He's completely awesome. But I thought I was only going to play him for a session or two, so I really didn't put in very much effort. And I found that when I did end up playing him more, it was actually a lot more difficult because I didn't have his backstory fleshed out whatsoever, so I didn't even know who this guy really was. So
Mm.
he's kind of always just been this very flat character to me compared to some of my other characters that I've built. So I find putting in more effort is better. So I personally, I would say, write out that 5-page backstory.
Just
It'll
come up,
actually help you.
just come up with something, because something usually tends to be better than nothing. Like in that campaign, I'm playing with you with Thanos. My character is possessed by 3 different demons currently. Like her whole thing is
Oh,
that
spoiler.
not really. I mean, she pretty much lays it out pretty thick that her whole thing is that she's been possessed pretty much her entire life. And because I had joined the campaign, I don't want to say mid campaign, I don't know how far along the game was, but I was joining in media res with the game. So I was trying to build in around what was already an established world, but also trying to build that character that had that backstory of being possessed and of having certain things. And usually I ran it by Kyle first, and then he put it in. But the thing is, whenever I go into that session, I go, okay, what fits in the parameters of this character? Like, how would this character act? How would this character behave? Yes, I'll throw in my usual, I don't want to say charm, but my usual whatever you want to call it, I will throw that in there while still being within the parameters of who this character is based on that backstory you wrote. And it is interesting because it had, right now with the pandemic, it has created an interesting dynamic. I mean, eventually, someday, maybe we'll get out of this or return to some semblance of normalcy. I won't go into any sort of political aspect of it because
Yeah, let's not depress anyone here
I,
about the pandemic. I think we've had plenty of that over the past like 2 years.
what I'm getting into that though is what is the difference you think? How do you think playing online has benefited ultimately the change in how D&D is played versus the old days of going down to your friend's basement and playing with little figurines and playing on mats. I mean, what do you think, Kyle, in terms of how it's changed?
There's a lot. So the one thing that you have to understand with online D&D that it will never have over in-person D&D is you won't have that personal touch. You won't have the, oh, I can see you, I can see your expressions and faces. Yeah, we can see each other on camera, but it's not the same even then.
It's not the same.
Yeah, and that part is missing. Now, aside from that, from a DM standpoint, everything else has improved. The reason why I say this is because when you get together with your friends, you get together, there's always the people who are late. There's always the people who can't make it because, the commute's just so hard or something's happening and it's just last-minute cancellations. And when you get together, players, they can see each other, and then when it's not their turn or when they're not being directly talked to, well, I can talk to someone else about something. And then there's these whispering conversations. So people are more polite online. And in addition, you're able to actually have other mechanics that are important to work, such as dark vision, hiding the map, having it all pre-prepped, and players don't need to know everything. You don't need to know your sneak attack and all that because it's just auto-added in with a macro. So there's all these wonderful things that online D&D has. It even has music, because I know in person we never really had music. We tried a few times, but it's just such a hassle. Yeah, it's a hassle, especially with the DMs. Let me, and it's just more natural when you have it online. So from a technical standpoint and from just a sheer are things better, like, yes, almost everything's improved online and it's made smoother, except of course IT issues and body language, which those two things is, I mean, they are big enough that they almost trump everything else. So that's why you can have a preference still of online or in person. Most DMs, though, once you put forth the effort to learn a system, which is a lot, then online, I could definitely see you having the same opinion like I do, where I kind of prefer online play to in-person.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Sherry? Do you prefer the online style of the way things are now, or do you miss those in-person days?
Well, I just miss the in-person stuff, period. I mean,
Yeah.
I just think I'm in psychology, so I think, like, in terms of what is healthiest for people mentally, and I mean, we need in-person interaction. So while I agree with Kyle that, like, from a practical standpoint, playing D&D online has a lot of perks, like, from the IT perspective, there's just so much more you can do, and you can also play with people across the world if you want to. It makes it way easier to find a group, potentially. Maybe you don't know anyone who plays D&D, but you want to play. You can find a group online. Like, you can pay DMs now, and they'll run games for you.
There are people that are professionals that do it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So from that perspective, I think it's great. But I don't think it should replace in-person sessions if you have the chance to do in-person. Like, I would never opt to sit on my couch or on my bed playing with my friend who lives down the street. That's just crazy. I would go to their house and we would actually spend time together like normal human beings. So as long as it's not replacing that, I think it's a great thing. But, you have to think from, like, the mental health perspective too.
Yeah, no, and it makes it hard too, especially if you're somebody that collected dice, because there is the benefit.
Goblins.
Yeah, and like all the pieces that we buy for the maps and the figurines and just holding physical books. I mean, there is something nice about that.
That is something else that's important about online. It's also a lot cheaper to have all of that.
It is a lot cheaper, but still.
And in person, you either have spent no money and are fine playing on just like pieces of paper and napkins, or saying like, hey, we put a figure here that's 10 feet away or whatnot, or you're gonna spend hundreds to make it look good. There's no in between. It's just like, this is haphazard. Like, we have a cool map.
Yeah, but what if you already have the physical setup and you've spent hundreds of dollars on that, and now you have to buy everything again online? Because oftentimes you do have to pay for the stuff online. It's not free. Well, and you have to learn the whole online system.
It is just a lot cheaper if you haven't spent it on either or.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just starting out, it is cheaper. But, a lot of times if you want to get into the multi-class if you want to get into multi-classing or you want to get into some of the smaller, lesser known things of D&D, it does help to go to a place like D&D Beyond and buy those books, which isn't cheap, but granted, it's usually a one-time thing that you don't have to do all that often, which comes in handy. But, it is interesting, though, that one thing that has come with the online is being able to customize your character the way they look. And, like, for me, I have an artist that I really love, and she will design all of my characters. Like if I know I'm going to be starting a new campaign with a new character, I'll give them kind of an outline of who the character is, what they should look like, how they should be, and I'll give it to her, and she, obviously I pay for it because artists don't get paid enough in general, and I'll pay her, and then in a few weeks she'll come back with a design, and it really does add to kind of the personalization of things when you're able to draw and create your own character that way. I mean, Kyle, how many people in your campaigns do you have that will usually kind of design their own character, and do you think that kind of helps?
It's far less than you would think, surprisingly. It's they are fine getting art online because there's more free options online. But if you want to design your character, usually what I've seen is people going to Hero Forge and making their own token there and designing it. If we include Hero Forge, it's actually maybe 20%, I'd say.
Yeah.
Still not insignificant.
But still, I think it is kind of cool when you have that creativity to kind of, whether it is on Hero Forge or a place like Fiverr or DeviantArt or Twitter or wherever, it is interesting to have that option because it does add a nice little layer there, because ultimately one aspect of D&D that gets brought up a lot is how important is combat versus how important is role playing. So, I mean, Sherry, how much do you prefer combat versus how much would you prefer role playing, and how much, like, percentage wise, do you think that you find that you balance it out?
Well, I'm definitely a big roleplay person, so when I pick like character classes and all that, I'm usually just thinking about roleplay. But I do enjoy combat. Like I said, the character I'm playing right now is a rogue, so he's kind of more in the middle. He's really good at combat, which is great, but he's also excellent at role playing. But I just enjoy role playing more so because I don't know. I feel like I can do more and I can be more creative with it. Whereas combat, sometimes you have to wait around a long time for other people to take their turns. So I don't know, it gets kind of boring,
Mhm.
honestly. And depending on the type of character that you're playing, your turn might not be very interesting.
Yeah.
And this actually brings me into why I don't like playing melee characters because, or really any sort of character without magic, I should
Mhm.
say. So they could be ranged, it doesn't matter. But it's just I want to have to think about what I'm gonna do,
I can hear
and
everyone
if
yelling
there's
Battle
no real
Master.
thinking involved, then I get bored. And if I have to wait around a long time, like 10 minutes to take my turn, I get bored. I'm gonna be on Facebook. I'm gonna be doing something else. Whereas
Mhm.
roleplay, I have to be actively thinking and engaged, and so I just
Doing
love
something.
roleplay. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to usually have to be doing something, which, I mean, granted, it depends on the party and it depends on the group generally, like how important is role playing for some people, because there are people who are just there for sort of the fun and adventure of fighting bosses and fighting people, and a lot of times they'll be more quiet on the role playing side of things because they either don't feel comfortable or they don't really know what to do. And you tend to see that a lot with newer players where, some will just jump in head first and be like, oh, like, I will, like, jump straight into this character. I have voices, I have this, I have that, I have everything kind of crafted out already. But then you'll have other people that are like, I don't know what to do. What do I say? Like, somebody will give you a prompt and it'll be like, I don't know what to do right now, and they won't have any idea.
Yeah, I will say that I think for new players, role playing is way more intimidating
Mm-hmm.
because you can literally do anything. So what do you do?
Don't tell them
I
that.
mean, if the whole world is open to you, then what do you choose? At least with combat, there are specific things that you can pick. So I think for new players, probably combat would be easier. But once I really got into D&D and I got comfortable, like even just with speaking. I mean, I was in graduate school for 5 years, so I had to learn how to speak. Like before that, I was pretty, I don't know, not confident in myself at all, so that really helped. But I mean, once I actually figured it out, it was so much fun because I actually had the confidence to try things and kind of take a leadership position with the role play. Because usually the groups I'm in, I'm one of the most talkative people, which is weird to me because I'm, like I said, I'm an introvert and I don't really do a whole lot of talking in real life, but I guess I can be kind of bossy, so that's good.
Well, and I think it does depend generally on the comfortability of the party itself. Is when you first start out, and if you don't really know everybody too well, you won't know exactly what to do. But there'll be times where you've been playing for a while, and then you can just kind of shoot the breeze for a while. I had that experience. We played a tabletop role playing game today, the Star Wars one, and there was a period where Kyle was gone for about, I don't know, 5-6 minutes. He was doing something else, and he was doing something else. But as we were sitting there, we just started having a conversation, and we just shot the breeze for like 5 minutes in character, just kind of talking about whatever. Like, oh, well, I know you're down to like 1 HP. Don't worry, I'll get around to it here, as soon as I can. Hey, you doing okay, buddy? Yeah, I'm good. And it's something that kind of comes with time, but not everybody's comfortable with that. And it is interesting when you get into that side of things. Like Kyle, for you, obviously as the DM, you're writing out these stories, you're writing out these combat scenarios. For you, which do you tend to prefer, the role-playing side of things or the combat side of things?
I am more split 50-50 with them because it depends how you go about it. For beginning DMs, and I did this when I began, I viewed combat as, one, this is easier, and because in role-playing you're mostly making a lot of the stuff up on the spot, and two, in combat it's just, oh, roll, all right, next person, and you're not actively using combat to what it could be, to its potential. You're not making combat come alive as much as the roleplay scenarios, which is why people prefer roleplay at times. You're not having a story be told through combat. And usually, combat, if done well, is meant to push forward the narrative. It could show that you are going through this difficult, dire dungeon and you're being beat down constantly. Or it could be the culmination of a story point. In combat, you can also have ideals go against each other. You don't need to have necessarily a discussion, but you can have a conflict through your own might, and whichever one wins is more right, because might makes right sometimes. I mean, you can say however you want that, oh, we're having this philosophical discussion, but if I have the ability to just beat you down and win at the end, and I don't need to care, then what is the value of your point sometimes? Like, it's a dangerous mentality to have, but it's true. If I could just erase you, what's the point? So you have these story culminations that are possible to come through combat, and combat also does take a while, and you are a little bit stressed as a DM to try to keep it going and keep players going on their turns, but it makes it so that it doesn't take, multiple hours of prep. It's actually a little bit easier than roleplay. Sometimes, if you don't have to homebrew new characters or new monsters. But roleplay is more along the lines of, if I'm going to have an entire campaign or session doing just roleplay, then I have to have a lot more points. I have to be a lot more on-focused and aware and kind of wondering what you guys are going to do. And you also have to be better for either A, you have to have a lot of planning done, or B, you have to be very good on the fly, or C, if you really want to make it work, you got to do them both.
Yeah, and I mean, it is really interesting how that kind of builds out, because sometimes you'll develop an entire combat scenario and then it'll get plopped out in one turn because of
not so much now, but yes, that used to happen quite a bit.
it does happen, but it does kind of have to keep the DMs on their toes a bit when it's like, oh well, you know, what happens if, say for example, somebody turns this big bad you put all this time and effort into a frog,
Mm-hmm.
like then you have to kind of figure out and plan in advance because usually sessions are things that are very limited. There are people that will play for like long afternoons, 4 or 5. Like people will turn into a whole day thing.
I remember those days.
But generally speaking, most people tend to play D&D from usually from what I've seen and from my experience, 2 to 4 hours. That's usually 2 to 4 hours is the way that it goes. And well, that's kind of the thing is you have to kind of plan ahead. So if you planned your entire schedule where, okay, we know this boss fight is going to take a long period of time, well, sometimes it'll happen where it'll get screwed over or something will happen. As a DM, you have to learn these new things and you have to plan ahead. And it is interesting because depending on the character you play, you may not know what to do. And as a DM, you have to kind of figure out how to learn on your toes and figure things out.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I was not good at being a DM. I'm not flexible enough. I have to have everything planned out. And also, I am way too competitive. It should never be a competition between you and your players, right?
Not necessarily true.
Really?
Yes. There are some times where you should make it to, like, for example, the big culmination of a boss fight. You should make it, balanced, but you need to make it so that you are actually trying to make an adversarial situation, and you are trying to beat them down. You generally, as a DM, don't want to just kill your players, but when it comes down to it, especially that last fight, it's like, I balanced this. You can win, but I'm gonna do my best to kill you. And DM versus player is a good mentality to have in certain situations, but you have to let your players know that, all right, this is going to be a tough fight, or give them a cue as, hey, you might die here, or I'm not going to stop. But when you give them that cue, then it's the, oh crap moment. Like, we really better, everything we do had better count, or else we could, like, he or she could kill us. And I have TPK'd parties before, but I've let them know, like, this is a big fight, or there's narrative build up to it to when to have that DM versus player. But again, as you stated, it's not all the time.
I think that's different than what I'm talking about. Like, actually being competitive with your players. It just sounds like you're trying to balance the game and make some combats difficult.
Yeah, but there are also points where I do try to kill my players. Like, literally, at the end fight, it's like, yes,
but it's
I will try to
probably
kill
not.
But you don't go out of your way early. You don't go out of your way early on to try to TPK your entire party for no reason.
No, that's why I said it's not constant where it's DM versus players. I do make encounters even sometimes early on where it's, all right, I'm gonna try to do as much damage as I can. If I kill a player, well, it sucks for them, but that's rarer. But there are times when you do need that, but yes, again, not constantly. If you constantly have that is a style of DM that has many problems attached to it.
How often do you find yourself balancing out the party when you're developing combat and you're developing scenarios and somebody comes to you with, all right, this is our party. We have a rogue, we have a wizard, we have a fighter, we have a monk, we have this. How much of that goes into your planning when you're trying to balance out the party in terms of how combat scenarios will go? And I guess generally, how important do you think party structure is?
Most of the time it doesn't matter too much, mainly because in 5th edition you're able to have so much healing by yourself or just supplement each other's weaknesses because of how strong the characters are. So it doesn't matter as much as it used to in past editions. Like, oh man, if we didn't have a cleric, we have to have like only 3 encounters a day, maybe, and that's really pushing it. Those better be light encounters. But in 5th edition, it's not as big of a deal. It's more along the lines of preparation on what items to give is where I spend most of my time, strangely enough. Sometimes during encounters, I might give more environmental factors if I'm seeing that players aren't factoring in the environment enough. But again, they're not necessarily class-based. That's more item distribution. For example, if you have no one who's a druid, I'm not going to randomly roll and give you a druid staff unless I'm intending like, hey, this is just random loot that you could sell. But if it's also items that you need for a class like a barbarian to supplement a weakness, then that's where I spend most of my time on considering class into it, is the items rather than the encounter itself.
But I'm saying as both a DM and a player, like what not just. I mean, I understand the balancing side of things, but I'm talking to Kyle, the player.
Wow.
What kind of parties do you tend to like to see, and what kind of classes do you tend to be more drawn to when you're playing? And this is for both of you, because usually with me, I tend to be drawn either. I mean, as basic as it may be sound, as it may sound, I'm usually drawn to kind of the rogue ranger type of character, and the kind of player is because I like being able to sneak attack. I like being able to be stealthy. I like being able to mostly be invisible. I liked playing as that sort of character generally. Although right now I am playing a bard for the first time ever, so I'm kind of learning as somebody who has only ever once played a magical character. It is interesting trying to learn a different style of playing for somebody who is known for being so combat heavy, to then be like, oh, I'm a support class now. I can fight. I have magic spells that I can use that can be used for a fight, but generally it'd be more prudent for the rest of the party if I put up a defense shield, or if I gave them extra AC, or if I gave them extra health, or if I gave them, a little bit more inspiration to their attack die. So it is interesting then when you're trying to balance that out. So generally for both of you, what kind of party structures do you like? And along those same lines, what classes are you more drawn to?
Well, I prefer a balanced party because I don't like to walk into something that I think is going to be a bad idea. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be in a party without a healer. I think that's a terrible idea. And Kyle, I know you said it doesn't matter so much in 5e, but you usually give parties, what do you call them? Like a character NPC or something?
A DM NPC if you wish.
Yeah, to balance out the party structure. So I think it matters at least a little bit. I mean, a party with no healer, even in 5e, I don't really know how that would work. I'm sure if you're careful and take a lot of short rests, you could make it work, but I just wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
It comes in handy.
Oh, it's not comfortable without a healer, that's for sure.
I'll play the healer, that's fine. I mean, and the way I pick classes is I try to see where I would be the best fit, because while I do prefer magic classes, I think they are a ton of fun and you can be so creative with them. That doesn't mean I won't play something else if you need me to.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've been playing D&D long enough to where I could pretty much fill in any role. And kind of the way I pick classes now is just seeing what haven't I played yet, because I like to try new things.
Mm-hmm.
And I get bored. So, I mean, I don't think I've ever played a fighter, so maybe that'll be my next character, just because I haven't played one before.
I mean, do you prefer the more wizardy magic style, or it would be interesting because a fighter is you see that debate a lot with the do you want to play more of a fighter type, or do you want to play more of a magic class? And I mean, Kyle, I know you tend to be drawn more towards the magic side of things, but
I used
generally,
to primarily. Until about a decade ago, I think I challenged myself to primarily play a fighter, and this was when fighters had nothing. I mean, you have now fancy abilities. What is this? But fighters before had nothing. So what they had to do is they had to look towards everyone else, and they had to try to gather everyone together and figure out what's best. Who can we use for what situation? Hey, I know the wizard has this fireball or whatever, and the wizard's just doing this the entire time, doesn't even pay attention to the terrain change, and by the time it's their turn, like, all right, I'm gonna... Things change. One moment.
Shoot.
Yeah, pretty much. And the fighter's able to see everything else. So I challenge myself with that, and then I challenge myself with the rogue. And at this point, I'm fine playing any character as long as it is not a purely wisdom-based character, because I am, that is antithetical to who I am. And it, more so, instead of class, I look towards what the group is trying to do. Like, if I see the group is all shaping out to be like, all right, everyone's dex, no one has strength, and no one has intelligence, like, I'm going to go with that. This will be fun. So then I'd play some other dex or intelligence-based character. If the group is trying to push it one way just to mess around, then I'll do that as well. And I have seen groups like this work out really well to where they have no intelligence and no strength. And like, oh man, what do we do? Well, we're going to be very sneaky, you see, because we're very stealthy. And you fighter and plate, stay back there, because we don't want you. Well, we'll sneak up and then you'll come in, and you get to have these creative and fun situations where you have to work around your weaknesses. Making it balanced is easier by far, and definitely more preferable, more comfortable, and it's I give the option of a DM NPC just so that the parties can feel that they have their own comfort level and a bit more control. But for me, having to DM so many different players, seeing so many different play styles, and having played pretty much every class through either DM NPCs that I abuse or through me actually playing a player every once in a blue moon, when I actually get to play, it's kind of up in the air. I know that doesn't help, but
you'll always be a wizard, Kyle.
Yeah, yeah.
Generally, yes. But it is interesting though, because, well, I mean, you say that, but everybody has their favorite character they're drawn to. What are some of your favorite characters that you have played over time, or some of your favorite characters in general?
My favorite characters that I have had to deal with was, let's see, I would say when I was actually able to play for the most with actual characters, that's probably been when Sherry DM'd for me while I was I had total control of an entire party of like 6 characters, and I was having roleplay in between each one of them by myself, just, DM weirdness and that. But I would say Korgoth as a shaman, like fighter cleric, that first edition bit. Probably Ravier, who was a mix between who was a Gestalt leveling a thief, which is a rogue, fighter, and magic user, which is a wizard, all at once. And those were my more favored ones because they had more complexity to them of the characters that I personally played. Otherwise, up until this point, again, up until I played 5e, it was more so, hey, let's go hit things, do the math, and turns, your turn, done, good, loot, level. And that was pretty much it until, I would say, the last half decade. So that's kind of why, but that's why those characters, those two were my most favorite that I've actually played. That and the minimal amount of characters that I played.
What about you, Sherry? What are some of the favorite characters that you've played?
Well, my favorite character ever was a... Kyle's looking at me. He knows. It's Trail in the Woods, the glamour bard. Number one, I love cats. So how could I not play a tabaxi?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how cool is that there's a race of cat people? So right off the bat, I mean, Trail's already awesome. And then on top of that, he's a bard, but he's like this totally flamboyant, over-the-top, performance-based bard who doesn't really get into a lot of combat, and I didn't build him for combat, but my god, he is just the best in roleplay scenarios, and he's so ridiculous and pompous, and he just wants everyone to adore him, just like a cat.
Mm-hmm.
And he can do all of these illusions and like fun bardy stuff, and I mean, I grew up doing performing arts and playing the piano and doing ballet and all these things, so bards just kind of come naturally to me. And I just found role playing him to be a blast because it's like I got to kind of personify parts of myself that I don't really get to very much anymore in real life because I don't do performing arts anymore. So I just found him to be a ton of fun, and we leveled him all the way up to like level 20, and he got all these incredible abilities.
Some
And-
players have even interacted with him. One actually tried to kill Trail. That didn't work out for her.
Oh yeah.
An ambitious
that
level
was,
4.
But it is interesting though. Like when you're looking like when you're thinking back on this character so fondly. I mean, is it the role playing side of it? Is it just the memories you have? I mean, like
It's just
when
all the
you're
crazy things he did. I mean, at one point, he went off on his own, and I forget why he did this, but he found a pack of orphans, and just decided that day, oh, we're gonna make a blood pact, and we're gonna become a family. And he rolls a nat 20 on his persuasion. It's like, okay, now I got all these orphans, and so he basically became not their father figure, but like part of their family, kind of. And at the time, the group was trying to start a bar, which ended up being an occult bar, but, you know,
The
that's neither
Gargoyle's
here nor there.
Chalice.
And guess who ran the bar? All the
orphans.
orphans.
Yeah.
I mean, it was brilliant. We basically got all these employees, and, you know, in exchange for their service, they had a life that was not on the streets, and they were able to make money and even to some extent get an education. And everybody thought Trail was a terrible person for making children work in a bar. But here I'm sitting here thinking it's the medieval era. I mean, these children have no better options. I mean, there's no laws against child labor.
As far as you know.
So
Well, I don't
Sherry,
think there was in Waterdeep.
something for you to note. A player of mine played in a homebrew setting. It was Thief Force, and he eventually got into a Dragon Heist game. They are now in Dungeons of the Mad Mage, and they also have a bar, and also, in order to have cheaper labor, have acquired orphans, who are also running the bar for them, who have also made all the
That's a
points that you
natural
have
thing.
made.
No, it is interesting though because it is the experiences that you have that ultimately draw you into finding your favorite character. It's the stories that you make and the stories that you come up with that make your favorite character. And I mean, I've only ever had 4 characters I've ever played as, and it's interesting when I look at it. It's the one that I spent the most time role playing with, and the one that I spent the most time building, which in my case was a character named Kai, and she was an absolute mad woman who, thanks to all the min-maxing and everything that went on, she, as I lovingly called her, was a range roguer because she was a ranger that then multi-classed as a rogue, and well, she got really high once and found a cloak, and it basically gave her a stealth of 26, which was just like ridiculous. Like it pretty much, no matter what happened, I would just always succeed in every single stealth check I ever had, which Kyle would make sure they would be as difficult as possible, but it made it so that I was able to hide out in a library that a golem had like lasers everywhere, and I was able to find a book and read it, and it made it so that I was able to literally run from a town of people, like, run away from a town full of people where I should have died because she's this flamboyant little thing, but she was able to run away from that. And then there was one time where there was a stone door, and mind you, she's not a halfling, she's a human, but she's only like 5 feet tall. She's this little lolly-like character. She took a stone door and yeeted it into the faraway distance because she rolled a nat 20 on a strength check. So it just threw a door away.
Well, you weren't weak either. You had a high strength, you monster.
I had a high
Oh,
strength.
did you?
Yeah, guy had like a 16
It was
strength.
a 16 in strength.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well,
Okay.
I tend to have like really weird luck when it comes to rolling, and so, but because I knew she was I mean, her lowest stat was her intelligence, which I tried to play up by the fact that she is dumb as a stump, but she would throw everything away and throw things to the side and pretty much find any way to go invisible and do things pretty much whatever she wanted to do. That was kind of her thing, is whatever she wanted to do. She had her own morals, she had her own thing. She was only in it for the money, but she enjoyed doing it to the point where she would like, it's like, all right, everybody got 100 gold for this. And I'd be like, all right, we'll just pocket a couple extra, and look, we had 88 gold altogether.
Oh yeah, I remember you trying to gyp the party.
Yes, and I did that multiple times.
And I remember you had that impressive weapon that you'd pull out sometimes.
Yes, a brick.
Mm-hmm.
I literally gave her a brick, and she was able to kill a surprising amount of enemies just with nothing but a brick. And mind you, she had a bow that was like ridiculously strong and with multi attack, but there would be times where she would just kill a character with a brick, and eventually she got a pet crab and then a pet raptor, and it just kind of worked out. It was just, it's how you would play. But that's the character I look back mostly on fondly. Not that I don't like other characters that I played, your Gardeas, your Alice's, or doesn't really matter what character you played. I do enjoy them, but it's usually the character that you put the most amount of role playing time into that tend to be the one you're most drawn to, I think.
Yep.
Well, they feel like a real person if you role play them and not just use them in combat. Another great trail story is he found this crown, and I don't remember how they found it. It was on like some kind of a skeleton body at one point. I don't know. There was a shiny crown, and I mean, Trail likes shiny things, so he takes the crown, and he's like, "Oh, should I put it on?" And everyone in the party says, "Oh yeah, sure, put it on." So I put it on, and I feel fine. And then 3 weeks later, things start to happen to me. And my skin is kind of flaking off, and my hair's falling out, and I'm looking kind of gaunt and starved, and it doesn't matter how much I eat. It's like my body's just falling apart. And no one can figure out why. And it gets worse and worse and worse until I'm nothing but a skeleton. So I have to get a hat of disguise just so I can maintain my beautiful, lustrous appearance. Because I can't go around looking like a skeleton. So he basically turns undead. And eventually the party figures out that, oh, it's this crown that's doing this to him. There's something wrong with the crown. It's cursed. We have to get it off of him. So they try to take the crown, and they steal it away from him. And Trail basically gets the orphans to go and get the crown back. They do all this roguey stuff. They have to sneak into a church to get the crown, and they almost die. Like, one of them actually gets shot by a crossbow bolt and almost dies for this mission. But he barely makes it back, and then Trail gets his crown back, but not before he has basically locked himself into the bar and barricaded all the doorways and has destroyed everything.
I mean, credit where credit's due to Alice, the current character I'm playing, though, is that she has been able to have her own moments in and of herself. I mean, even though I have all these great stories with Kai and the brick and the hiding and the running away and basically just being Jack Sparrow on crack, it's like, it works, but it is interesting when you do have these kind of unfiltered times to make your own story and kind of make things up on your own. Like, one of the first things I established with Alice was that if she feels threatened, she will pull out her music box. That was ultimately what killed her entire family and killed her entire village. And if she feels like you're being annoying or she feels like you're being a problem, she will wind it and then go, well, if it pops, everybody within a 50-mile radius will die. So, who knows what will happen. But it's interesting because Kyle had an NPC that was way way too happy for his own good. Just
Hi.
no. Don't bring that into this podcast. I don't need the embodiment.
Understand him.
I don't need the embodiment of the Walmart smile emoji.
Oh, but I'd be so totally happily to help you out.
I am so glad
I'm here for you.
I'm so glad I rolled a 4 on that, because I was really hoping that music box would pop and blow up that entire library. Because it's like literally having almost like having dynamite that you can just light off and let go whenever you want. But, and it is interesting though, because that was a role-playing moment that I enjoyed and I will have fond memories of. Or when she got possessed and tried to almost kill the entire party and then try to trick everybody into thinking she wasn't by then throwing them all off of the ship multiple times, just over and over until somebody went, I think somebody keeps throwing people over the ship. So, but, there are all these moments that you're going to have with characters that you develop, but it comes through role playing. And sometimes you'll have great combat moments, there are those. But I do think when you take the time to develop your character and find natural ways to insert your character and flesh them out as somebody who feels real, it does really add ultimately to the story, I think. And it does add on the memories of how you want to build and develop your character.
Even the combat scenarios that I remember with Trail had a lot to do with his personality, too. I remember this one time our group was surrounded by enemies, and Trail was just honestly, personally, I was having a bad day that day, and so Trail just wasn't having it. He was feeling kind of irritable, I guess you could say, and he's level 20, so ain't nothing gonna mess with Trail. So he looks at the leader. They're trying to take them to prison, basically. These people. They're trying to take the party to prison. So Trail casts Disintegrate at the main person's head and explodes it.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the whole battle erupts into chaos because now suddenly all the enemies are freaking out. And I can't even believe I just did that. I'm like, oh my god, did I just kill someone in one shot and blew up their head? I mean, how awesome is that? But also so dark. I didn't know Trail was so dark.
I mean, it can happen. I mean, it's just kind of the way things roll, for lack of a better term. And honestly, I think that's kind of what drew me into playing D&D and tabletop role-playing games in general. That's what drew me in, was those experiences that you can kind of create naturally. And these experiences that, well, even though they aren't real, they are memories that you have and memories that you've created that will stick with you because it's an experience. It's something that's a social experience. And, Sherry, with your doctorate in psychology, you know that, it, like you were saying, it is that interpersonal relationship that people have, that being able to interact and talk with others, it is that experience that makes people want to play D&D, I think. And no, it is really interesting, and I think this is something that is going to ultimately, we're obviously going to keep having more stories, and we're ultimately, our goal with this podcast was to not only introduce people to the Level Up Corner as a whole, but and kind of put other faces to the names, the kind of the people who are more behind the scenes, but ultimately to share stories, share experiences, and share memories and share things that kind of are important to us. Things that we find annoying, things that we like, characters that we like, classes that we like, things that draw us to D&D, things that make us enjoy D&D, things that annoy us about D&D, things that we love, we hate, things that we have from different varying experiences. I'm a newcomer. Kyle is a professional DM who has been playing for almost 2 decades. Sherry has almost 10 years of experience. So you have the newcomer, the moderate player who has been playing for some time, and then you have the veteran. So you're having these 3 different experiences talk about things that they love about tabletop role-playing games, things that they love about D&D, and kind of there are people who, let's be honest, I like reading, but most of my reading nowadays is manga, and Reddit articles and like the occasional news post, but reading is good for people that enjoy it, but I'm somebody who spends hours listening to podcasts. I'm somebody that spends hours watching people on Twitch or on YouTube. I'm the kind of person that I think media has switched in a way where that, as great as books are, having that vision, there are a lot of people who are audio learners and people who are visual learners and people who learn by doing that way. So in a sense, we're offering them an opportunity to, yes, you can go to the website, you can hire Kyle and do it that way, or you can go to the website and learn tips and tricks by going through the articles or going through the bots or going through whatever. But now there is another outlet for you to learn and experience D&D with people who know it. And
Yeah.
I think with that, I think this is a good stopping point for the first episode. Does anybody have any closing thoughts before we tell everyone where to find us and what to kind of expect from the podcast going forward?
Just play more D&D.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully there's people out there watching. If there's like a way to comment, do it. Let us know that you're out there. Tell us what you want to see. If you have ideas for what you want us to talk about, we might just do it.
Yeah, we're always accepting ideas and suggestions, and eventually, if we get enough people to comment, we might even answer some questions that we'll have a Q&A session of some sort. But it all starts with that first step, and obviously everybody's nervous in their own way, but everybody starts from somewhere, and it builds and grows over time. And I think that is something that will just come with time. I mean,
and we do have a Patreon.
We do have a Patreon. You can find it at patreon.com/levelupcorner. You can find us on Twitter at the Level Up Corner. You can go to levelupcorner.com. You can go to twitch.tv/levelupcorner. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much wherever you are. And if you are listening, give as many stars wherever you can. However you can, tell us how we're doing. If you hate our faces, if you like our faces, you can see us on YouTube. And there's a lot of different ways that you can find us, but I think going forward, they'll usually, depending on the holidays and how things go, there will be a new episode every week talking about something. And but until then, I think that should about do it here. And thank you all for listening, and keep playing D&D.
Bye, guys.
Bye.